GenerateBlocks 2.0 Alpha just released, and with it comes a whole lot of changes. Now, each one of the blocks inside GenerateBlocks has been completely rewritten to improve its performance and accessibility, but beyond that, there's a whole lot of new functionality and new blocks here as well. Now, I happen to know that GeneratePress's YouTube channel is going to be doing a lot of videos going through all the new changes, the different blocks, and the new settings you need to keep a lookout for, and I would encourage you to go through the changelog for yourself to see what all has changed. But as for me, I'm going to dive straight into the deep end head first. We're going to be taking a look at how we can now use ACF repeater fields and even do nested query loops. I got a couple really good examples for anybody who's new to the repeater field, so you can get a good sense of why this might be useful. And then we're going to go through the entire process step by step so you can see exactly how you need to implement this in the new GenerateBlocks system. If you're ready to get your hands dirty, then stick around and let's get started. So let's imagine for a second that we're going to create a recipes website. We'd probably want to go into ACF and create a new post type for recipes, and we can go ahead and save those changes. So now we have our custom post type for recipe. Of course, we're going to need some field groups to go with it, so we'll go ahead and create a field group. We'll just call this recipe to match, and we would need things like the image and description and all that, but one of the most important things on any recipe is a list of ingredients. Of course, we don't know how many ingredients are going to be in each one of our recipes, and it's going to vary from recipe to recipe. So without repeaters, you're really left with just doing ingredients one at a time. We could do something like ingredient 1, add a new field, do ingredient 2, and so on and so forth until we have plenty of ingredients for any possible recipe. Of course, you're going to end up with a bunch of extra fields in most cases when you don't use all 100 ingredient fields that you put in here, and it just creates a mess on the back end. So your better option is to use a repeater field. We'll go ahead and delete these two that we set up, and we'll start by just adding a repeater. We'll go in here and search for repeater and select that from the field type. In here, we'll call this ingredients. And this gives us the ability to have subfields within this field. So let me show you how this works. We'll go ahead and create our first subfield here, and we'll just call this ingredient. Now we can scroll down here and make sure that this field group is attached to our post type of recipe and hit save changes. So if we go in here to our recipes and add a new recipe, we'll go ahead and set up a recipe for tacos. If we go down here, we see our custom field for ingredients and our list of ingredients. If we hit add row, we can add our first one here, which of course is tortillas. We can add a second row for our second ingredient here, which we'll just put beef. For our third one, we'll do cilantro. And for our last one, we'll do onions. Now this gives us the ability to just add as many ingredients as we need for the given recipe, and is a lot cleaner than having to do a whole bunch of fields just hoping you have enough for each one of the recipes. But repeaters actually go further than this. Let's go ahead and publish this page. We'll go back into our field groups here. So under ACF field groups, we'll edit our recipe field group. And here inside of our ingredients repeater field, under our ingredient, we'll add a second row in our subfields. Of course, we're going to need to know the amount of each ingredient. So I'm going to create another field called amount. We'll go ahead and save changes. We'll go back into our recipes. We'll open up our tacos recipe. And we can see now where we had just the ingredient before, now next to it, we also have the amount. So we could say 6 count for the tortillas, 1 pound for the beef, 1 bunch for the cilantro, and 1 whole onion. Now in this case, we only really need 2 fields, the ingredient and the amount, but there are all kinds of use cases where you might need to have the title and a image and even a drop down for each one of these line items inside your repeater. And that's the kind of flexibility that repeaters give you. Unfortunately, up until now, we weren't actually able to query these repeater fields inside GenerateBlocks. But now with the 2.0 release, we have access to these repeater fields and all the power that comes with them. Hopefully this brief demo gave you a decent understanding of how repeater fields work and why they might be useful, but let's take a look at what we're actually going to be building out in today's video, which is another great example of using repeater fields. I've gone ahead and mocked up a course website here inside Figma. What you're looking at now is the single post template. So this is going to be the post that shows off one of the courses. So here we can see we have the post title, we have the course description next to it, and underneath it we have the 4 different modules that are associated with this course. This gives us a great opportunity to use a repeater field. Because each course is going to have a different amount of modules and we don't know how many modules each course will have, we can use a repeater field to bring in each one of the modules separately. As far as subfields inside that repeater, we're going to need to know the module number, we're going to need to know how long that module takes to complete, we're going to have a module title, and a module excerpt. We can do all of this with our repeater field. Of course, along with that, we're going to need a loop to show off all of our courses. So you can see this little loop here just shows the 3 different courses we'll be setting up. We have Freelancing 101, Client Communication, and Project Management. This is just a post query like you've done a million times before, but we can actually take this a step further using a nested query loop. You can see here at the bottom of these cards, I've added a little drop-down menu for the course modules. Inside the loop for all of these posts, we're going to bring a nested loop in that will actually bring in all of the course modules from each of the given courses. So this is just going to look at that repeater field and bring in the title of each one of the modules. This is done through nesting our loops here, and it's something that's only available to us now in GenerateBlocks 2.0. But before we start diving in and designing, we need to take inventory of what all fields we're going to need for this custom post type. Of course, we're going to have to set up our course's custom post type, but we're going to need some fields to go along with it. So let's just take inventory. For the course title, we'll just use the title of the post, so that's fine. And for the course description, we can just use the default editor field that comes in there. However, inside of our repeater, we're going to need several things. So I'm going to go down here and type repeater just so I know we have to add our repeater field. And inside that, we're going to need first the module number. So we'll go module number. Next to that is the time it takes to complete the course. So we'll just put duration. We'll need the module title, and we'll need the module excerpt. That takes care of everything in our repeater, but I think if we go back and look at this post loop, we need a couple more things. Let's pop open our text editor again, and we're going to need an icon for each one of these courses. So we'll do course icon, which we're just using an emoji here, which will be simple enough. The title will just be bringing in the title of the post, but we also need a course excerpt here. So we're going to do course excerpt. We have the long description of our course, but this is a little bit more of a condensed version. So now that we have inventory of all the different kind of fields we're going to need, let's jump back into our install and get into ACF to start setting all this up. Go ahead and close these things out. We're not going to need our sample anymore. And we'll go into ACF, post types, and we'll create a new post type for courses. For this, all we have to do is do a plural label of courses, a singular label of course, and we can go ahead and save our changes here. So now you can see we've added our courses custom post type, and we need to start adding our fields. So here inside field groups, we'll go to add new, and we'll just call this courses just so it matches the title of our custom post type and we know what it belongs with. So looking at our list again, which I will just pop over onto the screen next to me, we need to know a few things. The first is the course icon. So we'll do course icon. This is fine as a text field. We're just going to paste in an emoji here. Next is going to be the course excerpt. So again, a text field will work here, and we'll do a course excerpt. After that, we need to get into our repeater field. So I'm going to go ahead and pop open a new field here, and under field type, we're going to search for repeater. Now for this field label, we'll call this modules, or we could call it course modules just to kind of keep up with the theme we've been doing of courses here. Inside that, we need 4 different subfields for each one of our course modules. We'll of course need the module number, so we'll do a number field for that. We'll call this module number. We'll add a second subfield here. This one is going to be the duration. So again, we can go with a number field here, and we'll do module duration. We'll add our third field here, which is going to be the module title. So text will work perfectly, module title. And lastly, we're going to need our module excerpt. A text field again will work just fine, and we'll do module excerpt. Now we can just scroll down to our settings here for the location rules, and under post type, we want to make sure this is assigned to course. And under the group settings, we just want to make sure that this is shown in the REST API. This is going to help us select these fields later. We'll go ahead and save these changes. So here we'll click on add new course, and we can see we have our title here, which is going to be the course title. Here we're going to put our course description, and I'll just put in some lorem ipsum for now. We have our course icon, so I have a little taco emoji right here on my keyboard shortcut. We'll have the course excerpt that will go in here. And then for our course modules down here at the bottom, we can add a row for each one of our modules. So of course we'll have module 1, the module duration, maybe it's 25 minutes, the module title will go in here, and then the module excerpt, which we'll just put in some placeholder text. Now I need to go in and input all the information for our 3 different courses here, which is going to take me just a little bit of time. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video here, fill all that in, and then we'll pick back up once I've got all that information entered. Okay, so I've gone through and added each one of our 3 courses. We have our project management, client communication, and freelancing 101. We'll go ahead and pop open all of these so we can take a look through all the data. We of course have our title and our description. We have the course icon, the course excerpt, and this course actually has 5 modules in it. You can see we have the module number, the duration, the module title, and the module excerpt. Now notice while I'm doing this that it might be confusing just to have duration here and not know what kind of unit to put in here. So I'm going to go back in here to our field groups, edit our courses, go into our modules, and down here under module duration, under the presentation tab in instructions, I'm just going to put the word in minutes. We'll go ahead and save those changes. And now if I refresh this, you can see there's a little bit of helper text here that shows in minutes. Our second course here, client communication, it has everything filled in. It just has 3 modules. And our freelancing 101 post has 4 modules. So I've purposefully made each course have a different number of modules just to show you how flexible that repeater is. Of course, we have all the data here in the back end, but we need to create our single post template. So we'll go back in here into elements, add new element, and we'll choose a block element and hit create. This is going to be our course single post. We need to change the element type to content template and change the width to 100%. Down here under the display rules, we need to change the location so this shows up for course, all courses. Go ahead and publish those changes and pop open our Figma design again so we can take a look at what we need to design. You can see that overall this design has basically a 3-column layout that's repeated throughout. Here we obviously have the 3 different columns for each one of our modules, but just above it for the title, we can see that this takes up 1 of those columns and this takes up 2 of those. So we know we're going to need kind of a 3-column layout for all this. Of course, we're going to want to bring in the post title and the post content. And down here is where we're actually going to use our query loop to bring in those repeater fields. So I'm going to stick this over the side just so I can see it as I'm designing, but hopefully that gives you an idea of what we're working on. So we'll start here by adding a container with an inner container inside of it. We need some padding on that outer container here. So I'm just going to go down and we'll do maybe 80 pixels on the top and bottom and 24 on the left and right. Now inside this inner container, like I said, the first column is going to be just 1 column width and the second column is going to be 2 column width. So I think that's easiest to do with grid. So we're going to change this display to grid. We'll put in a column gap of maybe 24 pixels and we'll change our grid template columns to 1FR, 2FR. That way the first column inside of it is just 1 fractional unit and the second column will be 2. We can actually see that if we go ahead and add 2 containers in here. We can see our first column is just 1 column's width and the second column is 2 columns width. So let's go ahead and get our data inside there. This first one, we're going to need a headline block. And now to bring in the dynamic data, we actually use this little icon here for our dynamic tags. This gives us the ability to add this dynamic data inline, which is really going to come in handy later. So we'll go ahead and open that and select the post title from the drop-down menu here, and we can hit Insert Dynamic Tag. Now, of course, when we're previewing this inside the element, we don't actually see a preview of some of our actual posts we've set up. We're just seeing this element's post title come in here, but that's fine for previewing for now. We'll go test this on the front end in a second. Now we want to change this tag to an H1. Looks like our fonts are kind of big compared to our design, but we can tackle that later once we just get all this information in. Now inside the second column, we want to bring in the post content. So that's set up under the dynamic content block. So we'll go ahead and bring that in and we'll bring in the post content. Of course, this is just showing us placeholder content. So let's go ahead and save this and go check our work before we get any further. We'll go here into our courses, all courses, and we'll preview each of these 3 courses to make sure it's bringing in this dynamic data properly. Under our project management, we see our titles coming in here with our description that matches. Same here for our client communication. And lastly, for our freelancing 101. So we know that we've got all this dynamic data in this first section set up correctly. Obviously, we need to do some tweaking on the styling. So let's go ahead and knock that out real quick. I'm not going to worry about creating classes for all this in this demo. I definitely have some other videos that go over some strategies on doing all that. But for now, we're just going to do this quick and dirty. So we're going to change this font size to maybe 40 pixels, which will bring it down slightly. Go ahead and save that. And if we refresh on the front end, that looks more appropriate to our design. Now, if I bring Figma back in here again, you can see we have a container underneath this one that's going to have our repeater of all of these modules. So let's go ahead and set that up next. Back in here to our element, inside of our outer section, which I didn't actually change to a section. So let's go into our settings here and change that to a section tag. We're going to add a new container inside of it. We need to set the max width first, so we'll go here under sizing, and I know this max width is 1024 from just spending time with this design. Now under spacing, we need to set an auto margin on both the left and right, which will just center this back in the center of our page. I think we want to add some spacing in between this, so I'm just going to go in here to our margin, and we'll add maybe 80 pixels of space between this top section and where all of our course repeaters are going to be. So to bring in those repeaters, we actually need to use the query loop block. So we'll go ahead and add that in here again, and we'll just start out blank. I'm going to pop open the document overview here so we can see each one of these elements. Here under the settings on our query block, we need to change this query type to post meta since we're actually querying metadata inside of this post. Now we don't need to select anything for the post because this is going to default to the current post. Since we're building out a template, we want this to bring in whatever is appropriate for that post or whatever content has been assigned to that post. But we do need to go and put in our meta key. I find it's kind of helpful to go here on the back end, go under ACF, under our field groups, and have this list of all of our meta keys open so we can just bring that in easily. What we're going to be doing is actually querying in this repeater field. The name for that meta key is course_modules, and if I click that here, it will copy it to my clipboard. We'll go back in here and we'll paste that in, and we'll hit add. Now, unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the UI is responding to adding these custom meta keys, but in my testing, it seems to work fine. I've reported this to GenerateBlocks. This is an alpha version, so I'm sure it's something that will be addressed. But for now, we know we've added that meta key to our query block. Now, inside of that is our looper element. This is actually going to be kind of the grid that sets the structure. We have some default designs here. We're using a 3-column grid, so I'm going to go ahead and just use that as our helper class. All that has done is gone in here and changed the layout to grid and set our grid template columns to repeat a min-max of 0, 1 FR, which is basically just a fancy way of saying give us 3 different columns. We need to match our column gap, which we had in this top section here, which I believe was 24 pixels. And we can see now if we click on this loop item, it's just taking up 1 cell in our 3-column grid. So again, let's look at Figma one more time to see exactly what we need to design. I'll bring this in here and we can see our column's going to have a light gray background, some padding on it, maybe just a slightly radiused corner. So let's go back in here to our loop item and we'll match those things up. We'll go into our backgrounds and we'll give this a light gray color. Inside of our borders, we'll go ahead and link those border radiuses and give it maybe 6 pixels of border radius. And then our spacing, I'm going to link these values together and do maybe 24 pixels of padding. As far as the content inside of here, we're going to have some kind of container here, a flex container that puts the module number on one side and the duration on the right. And then we can use a heading block and a text block to bring in the title and the excerpt. So inside this, we'll go ahead and go to our container. We're going to change this layout to flex, which will just put the items inside it side by side. So inside this, we'll go ahead and add a text element and we can type in the word module. That's just going to be static content that is the same on each one of these. And after it will be the actual dynamic number that we're bringing in. So to do that, we can do this inline dynamic data again by clicking this little icon here. And for the dynamic tag, we actually need to look for a loop item. This is inside of our loop, so we need to select loop item. As far as the meta key, we're not actually able to see that from the drop-down list here when we're working in an element. I know that's something they're working on, giving us the option to preview, but I think that's going to come at a later date. So for now, we just need to understand the syntax of how these dynamic tags work. So after the word loop item, we'll add a space and type the word key and a colon, and then we can paste in our meta key for this module number, which is just module_number. And we can hit insert dynamic tag. Now it's going to default to previewing this dynamic data. We can also go back to edit where you can actually see the tag here. But unfortunately, inside of an element, we're not going to actually see a preview from the post. So let's just go ahead and save this, and we'll preview one of our posts on the front end. So you can see now it's bringing in each one of our modules. We forgot our vertical gap here, our row gap, so we'll need to add that. But you can see it's querying in and bringing in the numbers for each one of these modules. Of course, the project management course has 5 modules, so you're seeing 1 through 5 there. But if we go into client communication, which just has 3 modules, we're just seeing 1 through 3. Okay, so we'll pop back in here into this design. We'll go back in here into our looper and just make sure that we add that row gap as well, just so we have the gap in between our rows in this grid as well. All right, next to this loop item, I'm just going to duplicate this. We can delete this information out, and this is where we're going to add our duration. So here we can start with the dynamic text. So we'll go back into the dynamic tags, search for loop item, and we need to grab our field groups again. So I'm going to go in here to our courses. I just want to make sure that I'm copying and pasting this exactly. So we'll grab module duration, and here under loop item again, key, colon, and then we'll paste in our module duration and insert that dynamic tag. Now we can see this loop item key module duration is set here. And right after that, I want to type in the static content of min for minutes. Now in my design, this text is a little bit smaller and lighter in color. So I'm just going to go ahead and adjust this text. We might go with something like 0.9 rem for the font size. And for the typography, we're going to change this to a lighter gray color. Now I know I want these to align at the bottom, so we'll go back to our container here that we already set to flex and just make sure we're aligning that at the end and we're putting space between. That will make sure that this module number goes to the left and the minutes go to the right. But since we can't see all that on the back end here, let's go preview one of our courses again. Go here and open the project management course, and we can see module 1 on the left and 12 minutes on the right. And all of these are querying in the appropriate number of minutes that we set inside of each one of these custom post types. So back into the editor again, and inside of our loop item, we now want to add our course title. So we'll make this an H2. We're going to have to worry about the size here in a second, but we can go into our dynamic data, again, loop item, and we want to grab the module title. So we'll go ahead and click that to copy the module title. After loop item, we'll type in key, colon, and insert our dynamic tag. Underneath that, we can do a text block. Again, we're going to grab a loop item. And after this, we're going to do key, module, excerpt, and hit insert dynamic tag. We'll go ahead and save once again and refresh on the front end. And now we can see it's bringing in the title and excerpt for each one of these modules just like we wanted. All we need to do is reduce the size of this text. So we'll go back in here into our text, find our typography settings, and we're going to change this font size to maybe 1.5 rem, which is going to make it quite a bit smaller. Again, we'll refresh this on the front end, and that looks a lot more like the design we originally had set up here inside of Figma. Now, it shouldn't take long to make this mobile responsive, so let's just go through our settings here. I know we're going to have to change this grid to stack once we get to smaller devices, so I'm just going to go in here into the display. We'll keep it grid since it was grid originally, but we're going to change this to just 1FR, so those stack. Here inside of our looper, 3 columns is probably too tight here. So again, we'll leave this on display grid and we'll change this to 1FR, which will just give us 2 columns for each of these. And once we go over to our mobile settings, we probably want these cards to take up the full width. So again, we'll change this to grid and we'll make it 1FR, so it just takes up the full width. These two things might be too close together. They might need to stack as well, but let's just take a look at that on the front end first. So we'll go ahead and refresh here and go into our inspector. We'll bring this down to something like a tablet. We can see now on tablet, this is a 2-column layout, which still looks great. And if we get down here to mobile, we can see this goes into a 1-column layout. This module number and the time on the side seems to be working fine. I like to get down to somewhere around 350 or so and make sure it still looks good. And I think these being side by side works at every different device size. So as far as making this responsive, I think we're done. Next up, I want to set up a page where we can display a loop of all of our different courses, and within that show a list of each module title inside of each one of those courses using our nested loop. We'll go back in here into our install. We can close these additional windows out. And for this, we'll just do a typical page. We'll call this courses, and we'll start by adding a section to the page, a container. We'll change this tag to a section, and we'll add our inner container. Again, let's go ahead and add some padding to this. So here under the spacing, we'll add 80 pixels on the top and 24 on the left and right, just to stay consistent with what we had before. So looking at this layout, we're going to have something similar to what we had before, but here our title and description is actually stacked. We can see that it takes up about half of the page. So we could do a grid on this as well and just make it take up half of the page. And then we have our post loop here, which is 3 columns, similar to how we did before. Now, had we been using classes this whole time, we might have made life a little bit easier, but this really wasn't meant to be a tutorial on setting up classes, and it'd give us an opportunity for a little bit more practice. So again, I'm going to move that off to the side. And here for our first container, which is going to have the title and description here, I'm going to go ahead and give this a display of grid, and we'll change this to 1FR, 1FR, even though we're only going to be using the first half of it here. So inside of it, we'll do a container, which we can see is just taking up 50% of the width. And we'll start by doing a headline. We'll just pretend this is the title of the page, so we'll change it to an H1, and we'll put check out our courses. That's a little bit big compared to the design, so I'm going to go in the typography here, and we'll do maybe 2.5 rem just to make it a bit smaller. Now underneath, I didn't prepare any text, so we'll just do some lorem ipsum for now, and that takes care of this top section of our design. Let's pop open the list view here just so we can see what we're working with. Inside this container, we're going to need another inner container that's going to hold all of our courses, our post grid here. So we'll just do a container. We're going to change the size to 1024 pixels. And again, we'll do our auto margin on the left and right just to center it on the page. For consistency, we'll do another 80 pixel margin on the top here just to space out our information on the top and our post grid. So this grid is actually much more like what you're used to. We'll go ahead and start blank, and we'll make sure that we're doing a post query since we're going to be querying our post, and the post type will select courses. Inside of our looper, we want to do a 3-column grid again. We'll go into our design settings here and make sure to do 24 pixels a gap on the row and the column, and we can start designing this. Like I said, our classes would have helped us here because we could have kept these designs consistent, and there's actually a way we can do that retroactively. So I'm going to go ahead and publish these changes. We'll open up our course single post again, and we can actually move all of this over to a class. So just to make sure I'm clicking on the right thing, I'm going to click on this loop item, and we're going to go here and add a class. We'll just call this card. We'll hit create. And here under these choices, we're going to move the local block styles over to this class. So we'll go ahead and select move the local block styles and hit start editing. Here for our title, we need a class for that too. So we'll call this card title. Again, hit create and move those local block styles. And I think that'll take care of everything we need as far as classes here. So let's go ahead and save our changes, which will save those classes. We can close that out and we can refresh the builder here so that it has access to all these classes. Back here on our loop item, we can add that card class, which will bring in all that styling for us. Now, as far as the content, we need the course icon, the title, the excerpt, and then we'll need our little accordion for these course modules. So let's get started by adding our icon first. Here, I'm going to go ahead and use a text block. We're going to use our dynamic tags. This will be post meta. And if we remember, this was our course icon. Since we're actually able to query these into a page, we can get these from the drop down here, which is quite a bit nicer. So we know we just need to select course icon, and that goes ahead and builds this dynamic tag for us. We'll go ahead and insert that dynamic tag. Now we can preview all these here where we're seeing their actual icons come in, or we can go to edit and we can actually see the dynamic tag here. Underneath that, we need to add a headline block. So we'll go ahead and select headline. H2 is going to be great in this case. We'll click our dynamic tags icon, and here we're actually going to be searching for the post title. So we'll go ahead and select that and insert it. Now we created our class for card title, so I'm just going to search for that here and apply the card title, which is going to make it match the cards we have in our other design. Underneath that, we need to bring in the excerpt. So again, I'm going to use a text block. We'll use our dynamic tag. We'll search for post meta, and here we're going to be bringing in the course excerpt. We'll hit insert dynamic tag, and we can see the preview for the excerpt for each one of these courses, which is perfect. Now we get to the fun part of actually putting a loop inside of our loop. So you can see here we have our container, which is holding our loop here. We have our query loop, the looper, and the loop item. But inside of this loop item, we actually want to put another loop. Now here we don't actually want to just list all of the course modules. We want to put that inside of a little drop down. So I'm going to use an accordion block to do that. So we'll search for accordion here and add it to the page. For whatever reason, it's wanting to bring in this serif font. I'm not exactly sure what's going on with that. It might be a slight bug in this alpha, but we're just going to leave that be for now and not worry too much about the design. However, this does come with some default styling like padding and a border around this. So I want to go ahead and open up this accordion item and get rid of some of those styles since they don't match our design. We'll go in here to our borders. We'll change that to just 0. And in our padding, we'll change that padding value to 0 as well. Now for the accordion title, what I want to put is course modules. Now inside of that, as far as the accordion content, this is where we're going to want to add our nested loop. So in here, I'm going to search for query again, and we're going to add a blank query loop. Now, just like we did before, we actually want to query our post meta. Our meta key will be course modules. So we'll go ahead and add that. And then inside of our loop item, we're going to add a text block. We'll change our dynamic tag to looper item, just like we did before. And now since we have access to the dropdown, we can go in here and do module title. And we'll go ahead and insert that dynamic tag. So now you can see it's bringing in all of these titles, which is perfect. Now they're a little bit big and too much space in between them. So we can adjust that styling here in the style tab. We'll go down here to typography. We'll change this font size to maybe 0.9 rem, which will make it quite a bit smaller. And we'll make sure that there's a bottom margin of something more appropriate, like 2 pixels here, just to get these a little bit closer together. I might also want to make the color of this text a little bit lighter. So we'll go back into our typography and we'll pick a bit of a lighter color here. So let's go ahead and save this and go preview it on the front end. We'll go ahead and view this page. And now we can see it's bringing in the course icon, the title, the excerpt. And if we click on the course modules, this is actually using that query loop inside of our query loop to query in that repeater field for all of the course modules. So this way, if somebody's checking out all these courses, they can click on this and see all of the course modules that go along with each one of our courses. It does look like our font's actually rendering properly on the front end, so there must be just some kind of bug in the editor that's giving me those issues. Now, just to clean up a little bit of the design here, I see we have a bigger gap at the bottom of these cards than we do the top, and we want to make sure to set this up to work on mobile as well. So let's go back into our courses here. We'll go into our accordion item, which I'm guessing has a bottom margin on it. Yep, we have 1 em of bottom margin, so we'll just change that to 0. That will even up the spacing around here, and then we can test our mobile responsiveness. I know this looper is what we're going to have to work on, so let's go ahead and go to our tablet view. So here we definitely want to go with 2 columns like we did before. So again, we'll change this to display of grid. We'll do 1FR, 1FR. And then when we get down to tablet, we'll make sure that this goes to a display of grid and just 1FR, so they're single columns. And it looks like this is getting scrunched too. We might want to fix that on tablet. Yeah, I think on tablet, this entire grid can just go to 1FR. So we'll change this grid template columns to 1FR. Now this takes up the whole width of the page, which is going to work on our mobile device as well. We'll go ahead and save this, refresh on the front end, and we'll test all this in responsive view. So it's looking good on desktop. We'll get down to something like a tablet where we have the 2-column layout, and that's working fine as well. And then once we get down to a small version here on mobile, all of this seems to be working perfectly as well. I am so excited about all these changes that have come with GenerateBlocks 2.0. Like I said at the beginning of the video, there is a whole lot of new things that you need to be aware of, so I would make sure you're subscribed to the GeneratePress channel, where they're doing lots of education there to get you up to speed on everything you need to know. Of course, I'll be doing some more videos as well, and I'd love to know what kinds of things you'd like me to cover, so make sure to leave those suggestions down in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's video, I would really appreciate a thumbs up, and if you want to make sure to keep up with all the new things I discover inside GenerateBlocks 2.0, then hit subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.